What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. Thank you for joining us. My name is Eric. That's my co-host Will. And today we are going to be talking some more buys and sells, some more over and undervalued players, specifically at the wide receiver position in Dynasty. We're going to be going through keep trade cuts rankings and talking about some of the discrepancies that we have in our personal rankings versus their site, just to give you an idea of some guys that we think you should either go grab right now or get off your rosters at this moment in time. So I hope you guys enjoy. But before we get to it, Will, do you have anything to say to the people?
Absolutely. Before we get into this, thank you guys so much for all the engagement, all the subscriptions. Make sure you guys are still doing that. If you're watching this video, you're not subscribed to the channel, and you needed that reminder, just hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. That way you know when we have all of our latest fantasy football content out. And keep smashing the comment sections, guys. You guys have been doing awesome with that. We love the engagement, love having those conversations with you guys. So keep doing that down below. But with that being said, Eric, I think we're ready to get into it. I'm excited for this video. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, I'm excited too. And specific to what you just said about the comments section, if you guys have any specific trades that you want to talk about, you want our opinion on, leave them down there as well. We'd be more than happy to help you out with those, whether it has to do with these guys we talk about today or, anybody you want to talk about. So definitely do that, like he said. But with that, let's get into some undervalued players first, some guys that we think you should be going out and trying to acquire at their current price. Will, who is your first receiver on this list?
So the first receiver that I had on this list when I was making, and I saw that he was extremely low on here, it's Mr. Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, just recently came back from injury and in my opinion has completely hit the ground running. Just last week, he scored his first touchdown in, I believe, 22 games. I feel like that's something that has driven down the price of Deontay Johnson. Yeah. And with that being the case, and he's going to be scoring more, I think that this guy could end up being the limit for him, especially on a team that's been hyper-targeting him pretty much his whole career. But what do you think about this one?
I completely agree. He was somebody I had on my list as well. He's currently ranked as the keep trade cut wide receiver 34. I have him in my personal rankings closer to like wide receiver 25, so almost 10 spots higher. I think he's incredibly underrated. He's bordering on elite when it comes to his ability as a route runner and as a separator. Looking at a tweet, according to Dynasty IM, the only wide receivers younger than Deontay with a higher expected points per game are Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Puka, Amon-Ra, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave. All of those guys are valued as top 12 Dynasty wide receivers, whereas Deontay is the wide receiver 34. And I'm not saying Deontay belongs in the wide receiver 1 conversation, but the gap is just too wide between those guys. And I think that the biggest reason for that discrepancy is, one, quarterback play, but then also Matt Canada's play calling. Pittsburgh's offensive environment is just terrible. Deontay is 60th amongst receivers in target accuracy and 74th in QB rating per target. He is on the last year of his contract in Pittsburgh, so hopefully he'll get to go somewhere else that's going to be better for him fantasy-wise. But even if he doesn't leave, he's still producing as a top 20 wide receiver in points per game.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
All right, so we're in lockstep with our first one. Another guy that I have on my list here is going to be Puka Ngata. A little bit higher up the rankings. He's currently listed as the keep trade cut wide receiver 12. I have him easily within my top 10, close to like the 6-7 range currently. I just think what he's doing is incredible. His all-time rank amongst wide receivers through their first 8 games, first in yards, first in receptions, and third in fantasy points. He has the highest target share for a rookie wide receiver ever, and the only rookie wide receiver ever to finish with a higher yards per team pass attempt than Puka is Odell. The only other rookie wide receiver ever to hit 700 yards through their first 7 games, Jamar Chase. Like, he's for real. This is not a joke. It's not a fluke. And it's not just the stats that bear it out either. Like, he passes my eye test, and probably more importantly, he passes Matt Harmon's eye test, the guy that runs reception perception. If you guys aren't aware, highly suggest you go check that out. Matt also brought up a great point in a recent podcast saying that, if it was JSN that was the one putting up these stats in his rookie year and not Puka, he'd be a consensus top 3 Dynasty wide receiver with JJ and Chase. He'd be untouchable. So, like, I fully acknowledge that draft capital matters, athletic testing matters, college production matters. But at the end of the day, the thing that matters the most by a long shot is NFL production. So at a certain point, we kind of have to throw our priors out the window, forget he's a 5th-round pick, and truly acknowledge how great he's been.
No, I 100% agree with that take. I love that because Puka is doing what we hope that a lot of the top 10, wide receivers in fantasy or in Dynasty will do in the future, and he's doing it right now. So, like you said, to take all of that into account and look at that and be like, it doesn't mean much because he was a 5th-round draft pick. No. You got to look at the guys who are out there doing the things for their offense, who are valued. And this is a guy that this offense was looking at from the start because his biggest comp was Robert Woods, and they've been looking for somebody to fill that void ever since he left. So,
yeah.
With that being said, Puka Ngata, there's a huge ceiling for him, especially in this Rams offense with Sean McVay as his head coach for the foreseeable future. I think Puka may have helped reinvigorate Sean McVay's career too, to be honest with you.
I hope so.
Yeah, he might help keep him going because he's been awesome for that team.
And to your point about, guys ranked ahead of him that haven't produced to that level, they're more projections at this point. Like he's produced at a higher level than Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, and Jordan Addison ever have in their careers, and he's ranked behind all of them. Like, you can make an argument for some of those guys. I think Garrett Wilson especially, just based on situation, he could still be ahead maybe. But the other guys, I think give me Puka.
I would absolutely agree with that too, especially like Chris Olave. I love him as a prospect. I love him as a player. The situation isn't great. Derek Carr hasn't been great. I just don't know what's happening in New Orleans right now. But Puka Ngata, we know exactly what's happening. We're watching it every single week.
Yeah, and then just one last kind of comment to play devil's advocate to this. Not that I think he doesn't belong, but there are some things that hold me back from putting him in that like top 5 true upper echelon tier. One of them being Stafford could be on his way out soon. Stafford's been playing at an elite level and has a long history of supporting high-end wide receivers, so losing him would be a big blow. And then, like you mentioned, McVay has talked about walking away as well. We don't know whether that's going to happen or not. We'll see. But if both of them leave, that's going to be a significant downgrade for Puka. But with how young he is, like, again, especially at the wide receiver position in Dynasty, you want to value talent over situation. And so it's a tough balance, but that's why he's like right outside the top 5 for me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a nice concern right there because those are legitimate concerns because he is very much a beneficiary of the system over there in LA. So yeah, absolutely agree with that. The next wide receiver I have on this list, I have Tyler Lockett, who is currently at the wide receiver 51. I just feel like
wild.
Yeah, I just feel like that's kind of ridiculous, especially when you look at the names that are above him. But without even getting into that, Tyler Lockett has been performing at a top 20, top 25 wide receiver in fantasy level for the last 8 years consecutively. He's on pace for that this year as well. He's just been the picture book of, consistency in terms of a wide receiver in fantasy. The fact that he's 31, I think is something that's it's hurting his value, and it's just been overblown at this point. I feel like people disrespect the older veterans just because they're older. But at the same time, I kind of asked Eric this question before we started recording. If Tyler Lockett is listed here at the wide receiver 51 and he's 31.1 years old, that's probably the biggest knock towards him. Why is a guy like Mike Evans, the wide receiver 38 in Dynasty? Someone who's also, 30 years old, who's also been, getting hurt a lot as of late. He's getting older. He's still producing, but, there's some concerns that come along with age. But at the same time, he's still valued 13 spots higher than Tyler Lockett. Meanwhile, you still got guys like DK Metcalf who are valued inside the top 20, who Tyler Lockett has been outproducing. So it's weird for me that Tyler Lockett's at the wide receiver 51, but I think he's an opportunity for a lot of people to buy, especially if you have a contending team and you need someone who's going to perform right now. There's a lot of people going around him that I would not mind giving up to get a Tyler Lockett on my team to get that extra boost.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't have a ton more to add, just that, like you said, he's been consistently outproducing many of the guys that are currently above him for years and years and years in a row, DK Metcalf included. And also just with his play style and the way that he, avoids tackles most of the time, the way that he treats his body, he's probably got a fair amount of years left in the tank if he so chooses to stick around in the NFL. And so I see no reason why he can't continue to produce at this level. His stats, his separating statistics and stuff like that haven't indicated a decline yet. So yeah, I like that a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Then my last undervalued wide receiver, another buy here for me, is your boy, our boy at this point. It's going to be Brandon Aiyuk.
Hell yeah.
He's currently listed as the wide receiver 15 according to Keep Trade Cut. And I have him hovering around like the wide receiver 9 in my rankings. He's just so good and so well-rounded. He has the best raw PFF separation grade in the entire NFL, the second best raw PFF catch point and yak grade in the NFL. Like, he's become an elite route runner and one of the best separators in the entire league, while already possessing, like when he came in as a rookie, great ball skills and yak ability. So he's just the total package. He's currently rocking a 30% target share while also being first in air yard share, second in yards per route run, second in yards per team pass attempt, and fifth in yards per target. He's also third in total EPA and third in fantasy points per route run. Like, he's just a monster. All of the statistics that you can look at, he's in the top 10. And he's only 25 years old. And you know who else is 25 years old, but ranked 7 spots higher and not producing at nearly the same rate currently? Jaylen Waddle. He'll be somebody that we can talk about a little bit more later in the video as well, but Waddle's really good. But as long as he shares the field with Tyreek Hill, like, he's not going to be putting up difference-making numbers, whereas Aiyuk is already surrounded by elite talent and is producing at an elite level. And then to add on to that, after this year with the contract situations around him in San Francisco, either Aiyuk stays there and Debo leaves, and Aiyuk becomes, you know, the true unquestioned wide receiver 1 in San Francisco, or he goes somewhere else and is the undisputed wide receiver 1 on another team. So I just think Brandon Aiyuk is a top 10 dynasty wide receiver and deserves to be ranked probably over Waddle at this point.
Nah, I 100% agree with that. There's other people I looked at that are in that sort of range, or at least ranked above him, that I also would put him above, like JSN, Devonta Smith. Well,
yep.
Maybe JSN has a little bit more of a future ahead of him, but Devonta Smith is someone that I feel like is in that same bubble as Jaylen Waddle, where, like, he's going to have good games. There's some games where he's going to be great, but he's still got A.J. Brown there, and he's going to cap, you know, the ceiling that Devonta Smith could have. And Brandon Aiyuk sort of has that sort of infinite ceiling because, like we've been kind of saying for the San Francisco team, he is the best wide receiver on this team. Deebo Samuel's a great football player, but Brandon Aiyuk, pound for pound, is the best wide receiver on this team, and we finally got to see that happen this year. We've seen that come to fruition, and we've seen him be amazing with it. So, like you said, whether he stays here, we've seen what he's going to do if he's in San Francisco. So if he stays here, it's a great situation. If he leaves, it may be an even better situation. Who knows? But Brandon Aiyuk definitely should be ranked higher.
Absolutely. All right. Does that round out your undervalueds as well?
Yes, that's going to round out my undervalueds for this side.
Okay, so we can move on to the next portion here. We can talk about some overvalued players, some guys that we don't like quite as much as consensus has them, or at least as much as Keep Trade Cut has them ranked. Who's going to be your first player in this category?
This side of the video is always fun because this is the one where we get all the comments for. But the first player I'm going to talk about right here is Jameson Williams at the wide receiver 44. Yeah. I feel like that might even be a little bit too high. Now, I know people are going to say, you know, Jameson Williams, he's got potential. I think that he missed a lot of time early on, and that's going to be pivotal to his career. Some people are going to say, you know, he was drafted with that in mind, and they knew that was going to be the case. But if that's going to be the case, they haven't really done much to get him out there, get him to develop him to make sure he's going to be, I don't know if he's even the wide receiver of the future, because they already have an Amon-Ra St. Brown who they value already in that spot. They've already got a Sam Laporta who they have heavily, heavily favored in the passing game. And they have a Jahmyr Gibbs who they also really love in the passing game. So how much room is there left for Jameson Williams in this offense? I don't know. It's tough for me to say. And he's going around guys like Romeo Doubs, who has a role in his offense, who has that sort of, you know, number one wide receiver, number one role in that offense. Gabe Davis, who he's a roller coaster of a player, but he still has a role within the Buffalo Bills offense, and he does have those games where he pops off and blows up. I've just yet to see anything like that from Jameson Williams at all to give me the confidence that he's going to be worth something on my team, especially going around guys like Jerry Jeudy, DeAndre Hopkins even later, Jaden Reed, Adam Thielen, who's been very popular this year because he's doing extremely well. It's just it's tough for me to say that Jameson Williams is even in that crowd of players.
I don't think he belongs either. I think you're spot on. Like you mentioned, Adam Thielen or even Tyler Lockett, like you talked about in your undervalued list. I would trade Jameson Williams straight up for those guys, even though they're almost, you know, aged out of the league. Obviously on a contending team, not necessarily on a rebuilding team. But yeah, I mean, Jameson Williams was hurt when he was drafted. Didn't really play his rookie year. Played like 1 or 2 games. Did almost nothing.
Yeah.
Then got suspended for gambling. Came back. They've tried to get him involved. he's hasn't really done anything still. And then now the team's like, yeah, I don't think he's going to do it for us. They just traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones to fill his role for him. They have Josh Reynolds on the team, who's been outproducing him all year. I think the dream might be dead entirely with Jameson Williams. I might be a little bit biased because I didn't love him as a prospect coming in either. And so this doesn't surprise me too much. Like, I thought he was going to be better than this, but I saw the downside, and so that's coming to fruition. And I might be more willing to kind of cast him aside at this point than other people, but I agree with you. I think he's probably overvalued at this point.
Yeah, I'm not thinking he was worth that first round pick whatsoever. They used for him. That one's gonna go down pretty poorly in history.
Absolutely. The next guy on my list for overvalued is a guy that I've already brought up a couple times so far. It's Jaylen Waddle. And I don't want to bury him too much because as a player, as a talent, I think that he's very, very good in terms of some of the stuff that I looked at for Brandon Aiyuk and some of the other guys on this list for PFF grades, film grades, and stuff like that. He grades out fairly well. He's a good player. He separates. Obviously, he's got elite speed, and he can take the top off of a defense. But this is where situation really, really does come into play. Like I said when talking about Aiyuk, as long as Tyreek Hill is on this offense, which, he said, this past offseason that he was going to retire in 3 years.
One, we don't know if that's contract, true. I believe. I think you said.
Yeah. So that would be this year and then 2 more years beyond this, even if that is where he stops, because he could go further than that. He could have just been talking out of his ass, whatever. That's 2 more years that you're going to get, borderline wide receiver 2 production inconsistently from Jaylen Waddle, in my opinion. Like, I don't know. For somebody to be valued as a top 10 dynasty wide receiver, obviously you want to have youth, you want to have the ceiling, the projection of greatness, but you got to have some level of production as well, like somebody that you can put in your lineup and feel good about each and every week on a contending team as well. And right now, like, I just don't think that Jaylen Waddle is providing difference-making production to the point where I'm comfortable having him that high.
Yeah, it's like at this point you're kind of betting on a 27-year-old Jaylen Waddle to sort of be ready to take on, or you know what I mean? That's 28?
25, right?
Well, I'm saying by the time Tyreek Hill is gone.
Oh, no, absolutely.
But
that's a great point.
You're
Sorry,
betting
I didn't
on
understand it first.
Yeah, you're betting on a 27 to 28-year-old Jaylen Waddle to be ready to carry an alpha wide receiver workload by the time Tyreek Hill is gone for this team, which by that point he'll have never had. So it's tough. Like you said, it's tough to really bank on him producing at a high level and being able to even hold that workload once he gets there. And who knows how this team's going to be retooled, rebuilt, because Mike McDaniel, he stays on top of how this team is kind of tooled. So I got a feeling when Tyreek Hill is gone, it's not going to be much of a – it's going to be a shuffle, but it's going to be – the team's going to be tooled in a way that they're going to be able to work going forward, but who knows where Jaylen Waddle's going to fit into those plans at that point. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I hate having him here because I really do like Jaylen Waddle, the player, but he's not Tyreek Hill. Like, it's not like Tyreek Hill leaves and you just plug Jaylen Waddle into the exact same role. They're not the same player. Just because he's fast and explosive doesn't mean that they can fill the same void. And so, like, even if you're holding on to hope that he can be Tyreek Hill in 3 years, like, it's just not the case. Hopefully he produces at a higher level, but yeah, again, I don't see a situation where he can get it done at like a true wide receiver 1 production level anytime soon.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, with that, we're going to move on to the next wide receiver I've got on this list for the overvalues. It's going to be a pretty quick one. It's going to be a pretty easy one. It's George Pickens. I don't know, man. First off, I hate the guy's attitude, but we're going to talk about fantasy football here. It's just the fact that he is ranked above guys like Deontay Johnson, his teammate, who is being targeted way more on that team than him. He's above guys like Keenan Allen, who, again, an alpha wide receiver in a high-powered offense. Sure, he's on the older side, but in terms of slowing down, he hasn't done that yet. So George Pickens hasn't done anything to really put himself above Keenan Allen for me yet. There's guys like Jahan Dotson, who had his first really good game last week, who could, go up in value. Chris Godwin, just a lot of guys who have kind of proven themselves at this point to be fantasy assets are going below George Pickens, and that just doesn't make sense to me. Do you have any idea why he would be rated this high, or do you have any opinion on George Pickens being rated this high? Because it doesn't make sense to me, and I don't have a whole lot of rationale for it, but I just know in my brain that this is not right.
No, I completely agree. And I think some of the stats and especially the film bear that out, especially when he's been on the field with Deontay Johnson. He's far from the alpha. He's shined in a few opportunities without Deontay on the field, and he's been the wide receiver one, but he's never been a true separator, an elite route runner. People talk about his body control and stuff, but just, look at last week when he had 3 yards of end zone and couldn't get both feet down. Like, he's not an elite talent. He's not the body control and stuff that people talk about. Like, yeah, he's a great jump ball catcher, but it's only going to get you so far in the league. Like, look at Mike Williams. Like, what has he really done in the league? And especially also consider his situation. Like, Mike Williams was not producing that great with Justin Herbert in a high-end offense in LA. Pickens in Pittsburgh, like, come on now. It seems crazy to me. And then some other guys that you didn't even mention, like Josh Downs.
Yeah.
I have him way ahead of George Pickens at this point. Marquise Hollywood-Brown, I'd have him above George Pickens at this point. Like, yeah, there's too many guys below him that I definitely value higher than him at this point. He definitely belongs further down this list.
Absolutely.
This is funny. So we've had Pickens on the overvalued, Deontay on the undervalued. We've had some teammates. I got another teammate combo because you had Lockett. I have DK Metcalf on my overvalued list for a lot of the same reasons that we already talked about with Lockett. He's been outproduced by Tyler Lockett for what? 4 out of the 5 years that he's been in the league at this point.
Yep.
Or 3 out of the 4, whatever the case may be.
3 out of 4.
3 out of the 4 years. So, and in terms of just like straight up production, DK Metcalf is currently 35th in fantasy points per game. So he's not producing at a wide receiver 1 level, and not even at a wide receiver 2 level. He's borderline wide receiver 3 type production right now. Obviously, you love the build. Like, ideally, you have this true alpha X wide receiver that we've seen in one season put up monster numbers. But outside of that, he hasn't been able to separate well. He hasn't been able to garner that true wide receiver 1 role and separate himself from Tyler Lockett in this offense. And in what's been a good offensive environment as well, especially last year when Geno was balling, he still couldn't really get it done from a fantasy perspective. And people have been holding on to the fact that there's like a discrepancy between his expected fantasy points per game and his true fantasy points per game. I pointed to that with Deontay Johnson, but I think that you can excuse that because of the quarterback play and play calling. DK Metcalf doesn't have that excuse in Seattle. Geno's been fantastic. The play calling has been good. It's just not really coming together. And on film, I think it bears that out as well, like I said, with his inability to separate as a true alpha wide receiver 1. So I don't see why he belongs as high on this list as he is right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of context that comes along with DK Metcalf, and it's like you look at him, you're like, yeah, that's a wide receiver 1, but then you see it out on the field and what he's doing, and it's not adding up. And people that he is value adjacent overall players, just taking a look at keep, trade, cut, these 2 boxes I got it up on. Guys going after him that you could probably trade DK Metcalf for. Bryce Young, who, depending on the league, yeah, it could be huge for you. Zay Flowers, someone that you could trade for DK Metcalf for. Drake London, who I know people don't like the situation in Atlanta. Hopefully Arthur Smith is gone at some point, but Drake London as a prospect is still amazing. So it's just like, DK Metcalf is not better than, at least in terms of, I feel like long term, I don't feel like DK Metcalf is better than those 3 guys going after him that you could probably trade him for. So it's tough. It's really tough. But DK is definitely overrated at this point.
Yeah, I completely agree. And to be fair, he's gone down in value on keep, trade, cut. So I think he's probably approaching a more appropriately valued area. But, he had been within the top 10 and top 15 for a long time. So it's good to see that he's falling out of that, but I think he probably belongs even just a little bit lower still.
Absolutely. And then to go on to the next person, the last person I have on my list for the overvalueds, I have Jordan Addison, who is currently ranked as the wide receiver 11 in Dynasty. And I just feel like there's a lot of recency bias that's kind of cooked into that. It's tough for me to have him at the wide receiver 11 when his teammate is the wide receiver 1. And it's Justin Jefferson, who, when he gets back, Jordan Addison is not going to get the same level of targets that he's getting. A lot of Jordan Addison's success early on in the season was found off a lot of broken plays, a lot of weird stuff. And right now he's getting it because he's sort of being force-fed a little bit. It's tough to really say that he's the reason why he's getting as much attention as he is right now. I feel like it's just a lot of stuff due to circumstance and injury. But that's not going to be the case when Justin Jefferson is back. Obviously, TJ Hawkinson is also heavily targeted in this offense as well. So between those two, it's tough to say that there's a ton of room left for Jordan Addison and a high enough ceiling for him to hit, this sort of lofty wide receiver 11, standard they kind of set for him on keep trade cut, or at least what the people think that he's rated at, which is what this is based off of.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'm impressed with what Jordan Addison has done so far. I like him as a prospect. I think we both do.
Mm-hmm.
But he's definitely outperformed what I think like his true ranking should be. He's a guy that's opposite to what we talked about with like DK and Deontay, where his fantasy points per game, he's currently 17th. His expected fantasy points per game, 35th.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the touchdown rate. He's already got 7 touchdowns, which is second in the league amongst wide receivers. Touchdowns aren't a sticky stat. Obviously, you want guys that are capable of that and are going to be looked at in the red zone and stuff like that. But a lot of these have just been like deep ball, broken play type touchdowns. So that's something to consider. And then, like you mentioned, he's on a team with TJ Hawkinson and Justin Jefferson. He just had his quarterback Kirk Cousins go out with a torn Achilles, and he's already kind of aging. We'll see what he's like when he comes back, if he comes back to the Vikings. And I will say, if the situation were to stay the same, if the coaching staff stays the same, roster stays the same, and Kirk Cousins comes back and looks like his old self, there is a role there to be had. The wide receiver 2 in Minnesota for the past few years with Justin Jefferson there has been a valuable fantasy role. But if Kirk Cousins takes any sort of decline, if it's a new quarterback in town and the volume of passing, which has been incredibly high for them, goes down, there's not going to be enough pie, or, a big enough slice of the pie for Jordan Addison to have with those 2 other elite pass catchers in the same team.
There's definitely not going to be enough pie. That is correct.
I'm not wrong, but yeah, that was a dumb way to say it.
Nah, you're good, bro. I'm going to start saying it like that.
There's just not enough pie, man.
Not enough pie.
All right. I'm glad we ended on a joke. Is that your last player for overvalued?
Yep, that's all I got right there.
So that'll round out the video for us. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. And like Will talked about at the top of the video, please do leave a comment if you agree, disagree with any of these undervalued, overvalued players. If you have any specific trade proposals, requests, anything that you want to talk about with us, we'd be more than happy to engage. And also check out the link to our Discord in the description below if you want to have an even deeper conversation. Join the community that we've already built up over there. That would be fantastic. And all that other good YouTube stuff. If you can hit that sub button, you guys have been great with that lately. We've been growing tremendously. We can't, tell you how much we appreciate that enough, but we want to keep that momentum going. So hit that sub button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell so you're up to date with all of our latest videos. I think that's all I got. Will, do you have anything else for the people before we head out?
Yeah, just check out the other links we got in the description below to our sponsors over at Dynasty Owner and over at Do Numbers. Get yourself some merch, cool hoodies, stuff like that. We got other stuff in the works as well, so stay tuned for that. But with that being said, that's really all we got. So if you guys made it this far into the video, as always, we love you, and we'll catch you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.